Welcome to Kingdomize the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Welcome back to Kingdomize. I'm here with Bruce Mann and Ian Green. We are glad to be with you, and we are still kingdomizing everything. Gentlemen, we have been kingdomizing everything, what seems like
Yes.
Now, it does, this series, Kingdomize Everything, it does fit with our name, Kingdomize Global, so it does fit, although it's stretched out a little longer than we expected, but it's been great. Our discussions have been fantastic, and today's discussion will also be fantastic, because today we're going to talk about government. For some, it's a dialogue they love having. For some, they hate even thinking about it. So we don't know where you stand today, but we're going to have a great time discussing how to kingdomize everything in today government. And so I'm going to lead in, guys. I'm going to lead in with a scripture that hopefully will be a point of reference we can leap off for all of our show. It's found in 1 Peter chapter 2, starting at verse 13, and I'm reading from the New King James Version. As free, yet not liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all the people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. I love that verse 17. It feels like I'm being knighted there. Honor the people, brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. I love it. Anyway, so today, guys, we're going to talk about honoring the government, honoring the king, pleasing people, loving God by being good in our cities. We're going to talk about who is the government. How do we engage with them? How do we bless them? How do we disagree with them so we're not the evildoers? So that's where we're going today. Where do you want to jump in?
I would offer, just as a beginning point, that most of us live in relative ignorance of what is involved in governing in the formal sense. Our televisions and our news reports all focus on, the prime minister or the president, maybe a few key cabinet members and that. But there are a host of other people who are who make governments function, and we can argue whether they function well or not. But most of us live somewhat disconnected from the reality that these structures, these governmental structures, national, state, or provincial, and municipal, which most of us live in that kind of a context, they impact our lives on a regular basis. When you get up, and this isn't crude, but when you get up in the morning and you turn the tap on your house to get a glass of water, flush the toilet, turn the lights on, these are all part of governmental structures that provide us with the things that we take for granted every day. And so we need to have a bigger context when we're talking about government, because we tend to focus on certain aspects of it and forget others. And they're easy targets to complain about. So as people of God, as kingdom people, how do we engage in this in a way that's helpful?
Yeah, we have been known to be complainers as Christians. We have been known. I remember when I ran for city council, almost 20 years ago now, and lost horribly, I might add. But when I ran, I was actually in a debate with our ward councilors. I was running for councilor, and those running for mayor were there as well. And so we all got up and did our little spiel. I got up and did my spiel, and I was sitting beside the gentleman that eventually became the mayor. And after I sat down after speaking, he handed me one of his business cards. He goes, "Brian, if we both win, let's have a chat, or even if we don't." So we ended up chatting, and he had become the mayor. I did not get elected. As I said, I lost horribly. But I went to his office as the mayor at the time, and he said, "Well, here's my history with Christians. They invite me to their public meetings. They get me to sit on their stage and then say incredibly terrible things that I don't agree with, and then look at me like I do." And I tell you, I have felt used more times by Christians than anyone I can tell you about. And it's kind of what we do. It's like, we pay your salary and we do this. And Bruce, you might remember this when we had started one church, and now we're dealing with another mayor, the new mayor, and we want to just bless him as one church, the city network of churches in our city. And we took him for lunch. I don't know if you were at that meeting or not, but we took him for lunch, myself and
I think so.
The executive of one church. And there was two guys on the executive. I had primed them. I said, we're going to honor and bless him. We're going to just take him for lunch and see what he needs. And two of them could not stop themselves from just being idiots. Like, these are two pastors that knew up front what not to do. So I can tell you up front that Christians and the government, there's already a little bit of this going on. And so we're playing a bit of catch up when we start.
Yeah.
If you haven't started already, you're going to have to do a lot of gracious acts of love and kindness to get back into level playing field. I'm just telling you, I've experienced it. I've talked to many people in cities. It's the same kind of thing, right?
It is, yeah. We don't present ourselves well. We don't represent, our Lord very well often in these contexts.
And there's almost a conflict, right, in terms of, schmoozing up to the political candidates so that we get what we want, right? So we get what we want. So how far are we going to compromise to get what we want? And we actually have the shoe on the wrong foot. We have the shoe on the wrong foot. That's not the game. The game is, how do we best serve that leader who has been probably been voted in by the people, and it's a job that I tell you that I'd never want. I could not do politics for the life of me. But the level of abuse, conflict, and wherever. But we come as servants of Christ, and we want to bring his heart into our community. And we're trying to find a road how we can serve him so that the heart of Christ can be felt within our community. But I think for many years, I misunderstood. If I'm doing that, am I schmoozing? Am I giving up stuff? Am I compromising myself? That is absolutely not the game, because we can schmooze up to anybody to make a road for Christ to come forward. I don't have to give up my values. I don't have to give up my vision. I'm just there with a servant heart to see how best we can serve the elected person in our environment.
Yeah. Ian, I had the exact same thoughts and feelings before we got involved. And so you guys obviously know our story. Bruce, you lived the story with us for many years as well. But when I first started intentionally getting involved in politics, I thought I would have to, give up some values, like you're saying, Ian. And so the motivation had to be going in. So just as encouragement, people that are doing this or want to do this, the motivation has to be, I want to be the best for the city. So if you can say, I want to be the best person or the best church or the best business for the city, not necessarily in the city, that way, when you come alongside a mayor or a councillor, that should be their goal as well. So you can connect on the goal of, let's make a great living city. We don't have to agree on everything, and I don't have to feel like I'm getting used or you're getting used. We're actually here for the same thing. Let's create a great city for the people that live here and their kids and grandkids, right?
Yeah. This is an interesting conversation because it really does differentiate between what it means to be a kingdom focused leader and a church centric leader. I often will use the illustration from a book called To Transform a City. Eric Swanson's the author, and he talks about the difference between having a bounded set of worldview or a centered set worldview. So bounded set would say, I believe this way, and if you believe this way, then we can have relationship. And it simply creates barriers and boundaries for relationship based on belief. And often, as when we have that worldview, we'll see a government leader who believes differently than us and say, well, I can't have association with that person. I can't engage with that person because they don't believe the way I believe. But a kingdom person takes a centered set, meaning they don't ask the question, do you believe what I believe? They ask the question, do you care about what I care about? And if they care about the same thing, then I can engage with them. I don't sacrifice any of my convictions about, who I am and who God is and who people are. But if they care about the same thing, then we have some common ground and we can move forward together in a way that brings blessing into the community. And this is really critical for us as kingdom leaders, as people who want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Because really, there's a real disconnect and almost a hypocrisy when we are so focused on complaining about things that we are not willing to engage in and be part of the solution, right? I mean, that's not a governmental thing. That's a human thing. That's a societal thing. But in government, because there are so many competing priorities, I mean, in any leadership role, you're going to have competing priorities, things that, kind of scream for your attention and want all the resources. But think about it in the context of government, where there are just so many facets to what our governments, whether it's provincial, federal, provincial, or municipal. There's the social issues, there's the infrastructure issues, there's just simply the business of keeping a community running. There's so many competing priorities, and we can become incredibly critical of people who are, in my experience in meeting with government leaders in various capacities. I'm always, I won't say without exception, but for the most majority of times, I leave thinking, this is a person who really cares about their community and wants to help. Now, we may not see the world the same way, but if they care about what I care about, then I can engage with them and become part of a solution. And we work through the other areas as we move forward. And often that opens up a space where they can begin to consider a different point of view because they see something different in me, and I see something different in them. And for me, this is part of kingdom dynamics in terms of how do we engage? How do we change the world around us? We don't do it by pointing fingers and complaining. We do it by getting involved. And participating. It's a real test of our kingdom-centric worldview, especially in this particular area. And it tells us a lot about ourselves, maybe more than anything else.
I mean, the other thing too is that it took me a long time to fully appreciate the level of sacrifice that government officials have to make. When you go to, forget about the national and federal politicians, okay, but when you come down to local city councillors, like most of them, the only financial reward they're getting is expenses to go to a meeting. Like, they're not paid a salary. They're not, they may get about 15 to 20 hours a week of their time just because they love their community. Well, wow. I mean, that's remarkable. That's remarkable. Like, there's very few in our communities that would give up 15 or 20 hours a week to promote our cause, or the cause of the church, or the cause of the kingdom, right? But I think I have over the last maybe 10, 15 years, I've had just a fresh appreciation of what it takes to put your hat in the ring, the level of sacrifice, the criticism that you may get, because you just absolutely know you are going to be the brunt of someone's criticism. You absolutely know that. But they're prepared to do it. Why are they prepared to do it? Because they love their community, they love their area, they love their city. And I think an appreciation of that before we start getting the gun out and trying to shoot them is worthwhile considering, because they're not there on an easy ticket, that's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I know. So we've all done the pastoral route at some time in our life, and I remember at times pastors would sit around and complain about how much we work and how much time we put in and blah blah blah. It's such a hard life, whatever. And then I got to meet some politicians, and I started feeling really good about myself, because at least in the church there's a few people that like you. As a local politician, man, it's a constant stream of, I hate what you're doing. I hate why you do it. You need to die. Anyway, I mean, it's just crazy what happens. And so it made me feel really good about pastoring at the time. So that was fun. So guys, a couple things we want to cover today as much as we can, the time we have left. We've got about 10 minutes left. So 2 things. First of all, I want to talk about, how do we disagree with people in authority? So I don't think we're called to just obey blindly. If I'm wrong, you can jump in and say that. And so some Christians would say that it's like, those people are in authority, you have to honor them and you have to obey them. Well, I don't think that's what the Bible says. But how do you actually honorably disagree with those in authority? What do you do for that? And I'd be interested in your perspective on this, because I think it's really important, especially in the day we live in. There's a lot of things that we're told we have to do that I think goes a bit against who we are as Christians. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's possible. I think it may sound like an oxymoron, right? But I think it's possible to disobey and still honor. I think it's possible to do the both, right? So we're told to honor the person. We may not agree with all their policies, and I think the stick that most of us have used for many years, that if it goes against the Bible, if it goes against your conscience, if it goes against whatever, then you basically can't sign up for it, right? But you can still honor the person. You can still honor their role. You can still honor their position. They've been voted in. They have sacrificed what, so we can still honor the person, although we don't agree with their policies. And in fact, I'm not obeying their policies. I'm not going to do that. It goes against my conscience. It goes against my Kingdomize worldview, except my personal values. And so, yeah, I think it's possible to do both. I think it's possible to disobey and to be honorable.
Really good. Bruce, what would you add to that? That's really good.
Well, in the military, that's called a conscientious objector, right? And there are interesting stories about those who were conscientious objectors who said, I will not go and bear arms against another person, but I'll go and I'll be a medic, right? And I'll help care for the people. Like finding a place where you can engage and be helpful is, if we bring it back into the governmental context, I mean, most issues are not life and death, right? They're more about priorities. And so how do we engage in a way that helps clarify why we would espouse a certain priority over something else? And then, like in most cases, when we find these areas, we need to have the patience and the willingness to continue to find common ground that you can build something on, that you can bring about a change or bring about a compromise that, so it's hard work to be unified. It doesn't, like it really is, not just in government, in any context. And so are we willing to, and do we understand that the role we're called to as kingdom leaders is hard work, and it requires us to be thoughtful. It requires us to be patient. It requires us to go that extra mile to find a place and a way to engage with others in various settings, but in government as one, where we can begin to build something that we do find as common ground, and be willing to state our case and to hold to our convictions, but not in a way that villainizes the other person, respects who they are, but does it in a way. This is challenging stuff for anyone, but it's certainly, as followers of Christ, we need to do it with a deep reverence for the other person, but also a deep reverence for Christ. And that, my experience has been, if I come at it with the right attitude, you can have a meaningful conversation with someone that you disagree with. When I come at it in a confrontational way, it usually digresses quickly into becoming just an argument, and we stop hearing, what's being said to us.
Yeah, really good. When you brought up the conscientious objector, I was thinking of the movie Hacksaw Ridge. I don't know if you guys saw that movie.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, brilliant.
World War II. What's the guy? Desmond Doss was the guy's name, but he was a conscientious objector. He wouldn't shoot. He wouldn't even carry a gun. But he joined the army. He was conscribed, right? So, but his story, and when they made the story, they toned his story down because they said no one would believe how many people he saved in the war. They actually had to tone his story down as a conscientious objector to still be a Christ-like person in a war. Like, amazing. So what a great way to describe that, Bruce. That's really, really good. I like that a lot. I want to share the context I read earlier from 1 Peter 2:13-17. But I think the verse just before this, verse 13 starts, "For submit yourselves," and whenever there's a therefore in Scripture, you need to ask why it's therefore. And so the context is having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works which they observe glorify God in the day. So they want to call you evil, but you've been so good in the community that they have to say, look at their good works. So the idea of honoring those in authority, those above you, isn't necessarily have to obey them all. It's like honor God by loving people and doing good works. And then when they say, well, you're one of those evildoers, well, the proof in your life is that you're not. And you didn't obey everything they said, but there was honorability. And I love how the Message says, it says, live an exemplary life in your neighborhood so that your actions will refute their prejudices. Then they'll be won over to God's side, and they will join in the celebration when he arrives. How great is that? How great is that?
Yeah, fantastic.
Let's use the end of our time by telling a couple stories. You guys have got some great stories of how it's working. Bruce, if you could tell the story of what you're doing in Africa with commissioning lifestyle and integrity. Ian, you can tell whichever story you want. But let's just end with some, here's some people that are doing it on purpose.
Yeah, well, I'll share very quickly. I'm part of an organization called Commissioning a Lifestyle of Integrity, where we work to combat corruption, and particularly in Africa, where corruption is just debilitating and is creating so much dysfunction and poverty, where resources are not getting where they need to get to provide help and build infrastructure, build countries and communities. And what I've found is most people don't get up in the morning and go, I'm going to be corrupt today. Today I'm going to be a corrupt person. What they do is they get up and they get back in the stream of society that is filled with corruption in covert and overt ways. But I've also found that when you provide people with solutions, when you provide them with opportunities, support, and help and understanding as to why this isn't right and what you could do differently, they often will choose integrity over corruption. But sometimes it's just so entrenched and so deeply embedded. And you'll hear this even in our part of the world where all politicians are corrupt and you can't trust a politician. Well, I'm beg to differ. I know some who I would trust very openly, but there's this stereotype, and that doesn't mean there haven't been corrupt officials. There's been corrupt people in almost any area of influence and area of work. There's no politicians don't have the market cornered. This is a human issue, not a political issue. But as a follower of Christ, I have to trust the message of the kingdom and its impactfulness on people of goodwill. And I have found a lot of people of goodwill within government circles. And so the message that, when we can come and present a message of goodwill and engage with people, I find very little pushback on the fact that it's coming from a Christian or from a religious context. If, in their mind, because it's producing good fruit. And in Africa, we're seeing that. We don't have to tell people this is corrupt. What we have to do is say, here's how to live with integrity. And people can choose, they will choose. They don't all do, and they don't always do it perfectly. But most people will choose a path of integrity if they understand it, they see the benefit, and they have support.
Yeah.
And we've seen great results in that.
Yeah, and Bruce, you guys are in Sierra Leone, Kenya, Uganda, and you're stretching into all of Africa. You've got invitations to other countries as well. So amazing. And so when you were talking about this, it reminded me of our Pancho Murguia from Juarez, Mexico, right? They were facing the same thing in Mexico, and they started this movement that's going today called, in English, it translates into Thrive Without Bribes, right? Because that was common.
Yeah.
Corruption was you bribe somebody, you get something, right? So they created that movement that became, and is very significant, Thrive Without Bribes. So really good. Ian, another story you want to add on to before we're done?
Yeah, a story of as we serve the politicians, how it opens the doors for a community to thrive and people to thrive. So for quite a number of years, I was working in some small communities in Romania. Azarani was one of those communities. I mean, it's like 94% unemployment. You could almost feel the hopelessness as you walked into that community, and we felt it was absolutely inappropriate just to go Bible bashing. We had to find some solutions to that community. And so we spoke to the mayor. We said, look, can we have permission to maybe start some small industries here? And so we started two small industries. One was a sewing shop, which they actually made personal greeting cards. And another one, well, we thought that all Roma people, they loved woodwork. So we thought, okay, we'll open a carpenter shop. We discovered not all Roma people love woodwork. In fact, some hate it with a vengeance. And so we kind of switched our tactic to teaching construction. And as we taught them how to build and whatever, the amazing thing was, because we had incorporated the mayor's goodwill right at the beginning, at the end of our 1-year course, he says, you know what, I got some jobs for these guys. I got paid work for them. And so it was just an example for me. We could have just merrily gone on, not engaged with him on anybody, stay in a little Christian ghetto and just, bless it. But now suddenly we got influence. And since then, the mayor has been absolutely fantastic in that community. When we talked about small farming for the people there, he says, okay, you can have all this land. They can farm goats, sheep, chickens, whatever. But it all started by us going to the mayor, says, we need to find a solution. This is what we're thinking. What do you feel about that? And so that attitude of servanthood opened up the door wide open for us.
Yeah, really good, guys. Guys, this has been amazing today. Great discussion. Felt like we were honoring him. So I just want to thank you for that. And thanks for listening, those that are listening right now. And if you're involved already in politics or in the government and whatever level that is, we just want to honor that. We think it's so significant, as a significant fear in our cities and our nations that we want to bring the kingdom to. So we honor you in that. If you're considering it, then we're saying, man, if God's saying yes to that, then you go hard after that. If we can help serve you in any way, we're here for that as well. But we just want to honor those that are doing it. We want to keep that in mind. We want to, at the same time, keep our integrity of our values, which is amazing. And so, yeah, we're glad you're listening. And guys, several times today, you've mentioned bringing solutions. So that's a great lead-in. Just so you know, in a couple weeks from now, we're starting a new series called Solutionaries. We'll be interviewing some of these people we've talked about for the last couple of years here that we've dialogued about. We're going to have interviews of them. And so in our new series that starts in 2 weeks called Solutionaries, and it's going to be fantastic. If you haven't already subscribed to our page, you need to do that, or to our YouTube channel, the Spotify channel. You need to do that. You need to share this with somebody and become part of our community, because we believe there's going to be a bunch of stories that will both inspire you, but also help you to be a solutionary in your context. So thanks today for joining in, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Kingdomize the podcast.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.